How do you write a 2.5-page ransom note inside someone else's house while a 6-year-old girl lies dead in the basement below you? Pause. That is not a hypothetical. That is what happened on Christmas night, 1996, in Boulder, Colorado. The killer didn't flee, didn't panic, sat down, found a pen, found paper, and wrote. Calmly, at length, in a home they knew well enough to navigate in the dark. And when the mother found that note the next morning, and then found her daughter, the case that followed would become the most scrutinized, most mishandled, and most unresolved murder in modern American history. 27 years later, no one has been charged. To understand what happened to JonBenét Ramsey, you first have to understand who she is. Not the girl in the photographs, the one in the rhinestone tiara and the sequin gown that the tabloids plaster across every front page in America. Not the pageant persona, the one the cameras capture twirling under stage lights with a smile that could fill a stadium. That version of JonBenét becomes an icon, a tragedy, a symbol. But before all of that, she is just a kid. She is born on August 6, 1990, in Atlanta, Georgia, the second child of JonBenét Ramsey and Patricia and Ramsey, known to everyone who loves her as Patsy. From the very beginning, JonBenét is a bright, energetic little girl with a laugh that people describe as infectious, the kind that makes everyone in the room laugh along whether they mean to or not. She has her mother's expressive eyes and a personality that seems too large to be contained in such a small body. The Ramsey family is, by any measure, a picture of American success. John Ramsey is the founder and CEO of Access Graphics, a computer distribution company based in Boulder, Colorado, that by the mid-1990s is generating over $1 billion in revenue annually. He is tall, measured, methodical, the kind of man who thinks before he speaks and weighs every word. He has children from a previous marriage, John Andrew and Melinda, older kids from his first wife, Lucinda, whom he divorced in 1978. He remarries Patsy in 1980, and together they build what looks, from the outside, like a perfect life. Patsy Ramsey is one of those people who seems to be lit from within. She is a West Virginia girl, a former Miss West Virginia, in fact, crowned in 1977, and she carries that beauty queen warmth into every room she enters. She is not the stereotypical pageant mother, at least not according to those who know her. She is genuinely warm, fiercely devoted, and deeply religious. She volunteers at her church. She is the kind of mother who decorates the house for every holiday with the focused enthusiasm of a set designer. The Ramseys moved to Boulder, Colorado, in 1991 and settle into a world that suits them. Boulder is a college town, a progressive enclave nestled against the Rocky Mountains, population just under 100,000. It is consistently ranked among the safest cities in the country. Crime is low. Neighbors know each other. Children play in the streets. It is, by all accounts, the kind of place where nothing terrible is supposed to happen. Their home on 15th Street in the University Hill neighborhood reflects their status. It is a massive Tudor-style house, over 6,600 square feet, with winding staircases, multiple fireplaces, a wine cellar, a butler's pantry, and a basement with several interconnected rooms. It is the kind of house that takes time to learn, the kind with corners and corridors that even the people living in it don't fully map until they've been there for years. JonBenét begins competing in child beauty pageants at the age of 4, following in her mother's footsteps. She holds titles including Little Miss Colorado and Colorado's Little Miss Christmas. On stage, she is magnetic. Off stage, she is a first grader at High Peaks Elementary School who loves her dog Jacques, adores her older brother Burke, and is learning to ride horses. Burke Ramsey is 9 years old in 1996. He is quiet where JonBenét is expressive, introverted where she is outgoing. The two siblings are close in the easy, unsentimental way children are close, bickering one moment, loyal the next. There is one shadow over this otherwise gilded family portrait. In 1993, Patsy Ramsey is diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. The prognosis is grim. She undergoes aggressive chemotherapy at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, and defies the odds. By 1994, she is declared cancer-free. The experience shakes her to her core and deepens her faith. Those who know Patsy say the brush with death makes her more present, more joyful, more determined to celebrate every moment. Christmas, in the Ramsey household, is not just a holiday. It is an event. Patsy spends weeks decorating. The 1996 Christmas season is no different. She puts up a tree in the living room, one in the sunroom, and a smaller one in JonBenét's bedroom. She strings lights along the staircases and arranges presents beneath the main tree in carefully organized stacks. The house looks, according to friends who visit that season, like something out of a holiday magazine. On the evening of December 25, 1996, the Ramseys attend a Christmas party at the home of their friends Fleet and Priscilla White. JonBenét falls asleep in the car on the way home. John carries her inside, still in her white turtleneck and black velvet pants, and places her directly into bed. Patsy tucks her in, kisses her goodnight. It is the last time she sees her daughter alive. But the morning that follows, and what is found inside that house, is about to become the most scrutinized crime scene in American history. December 26, 1996. It is 5:52 in the morning. Patsy Ramsey wakes up early to prepare for a flight. The family is scheduled to travel to their vacation home in Charlevoix, Michigan, later that morning, a holiday tradition. She puts on the same red turtleneck she wore the night before, fixes her hair and makeup, and heads downstairs. She reaches the spiral staircase, and that is where she finds it. 3 pages of paper, handwritten in black felt-tip pen, lying on the 3rd step from the bottom, as though placed there deliberately, positioned exactly where Patsy cannot miss them. She picks them up. She reads the first line. Pause. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country it serves. Her eyes move faster. Her heart is already hammering. The letter demands $118,000, a strangely specific amount, roughly equivalent to the bonus John Ramsey received that year from Access Graphics, for the safe return of JonBenét. It warns the family not to contact the FBI or the police. It threatens JonBenét's life in explicit terms. It is signed, Victory, SBTC. Patsy drops the pages and runs upstairs. JonBenét's bed is empty. She screams for John. He checks the house. Burke is in his room, asleep. JonBenét is nowhere. Patsy calls 911 at 5:52 a.m. The recording of that call will later become one of the most analyzed audio documents in the history of American true crime. Her voice is ragged with panic. She can barely get the words out. Officers arrive within minutes. This is where the investigation begins, and where some of the most consequential mistakes in the case are also made. Detective Linda Arnn arrives on scene. Friends of the Ramseys begin arriving at the house throughout the morning. A natural impulse, this gathering of community around a family in crisis. But what it means, practically, is that multiple people are now moving through the crime scene, touching surfaces, standing in rooms, contaminating what should be a sealed, controlled environment. The ransom note is extraordinary in several ways that detectives note immediately. At 2.5 pages, it is unusually long for a kidnapping demand. Most are a single sentence. Investigators will later estimate it contains approximately 369 words. The language is theatrical and overwrought, filled with phrases that feel borrowed from spy thrillers rather than from the vocabulary of an actual kidnapper. The demanded amount of $118,000 is bizarre. Professional kidnappers typically demand round numbers. And it is handwritten, which means it can potentially be matched to a known hand. The note is taken into evidence. A search begins, or what passes for a search. This is the detail that will torture investigators for years. Hours pass. The house is large and complicated, full of rooms and corridors and subspaces that the responding officers don't fully explore. A police officer looks briefly into the basement, one of several interconnected rooms, and sees nothing immediately alarming. She notes it is locked. She moves on. At approximately 1 p.m., Detective Arndt asks John Ramsey and his friend Fleet White to search the house more thoroughly, looking for anything unusual. It is, in retrospect, an almost incomprehensible instruction, sending the father and a family friend to search the home, rather than trained investigators. John Ramsey heads to the basement. He opens the door to the wine cellar. And there, in the small dark room used for storage, hidden beneath a white blanket, is JonBenét. She is bound. A piece of cord is around her wrists, raised above her head. Her mouth is covered with a strip of black duct tape. There is a cord around her neck, a garrote, fashioned from a broken paintbrush handle that Patsy later identifies as belonging to her own craft supplies. John Ramsey lets out a sound that witnesses say they will never forget. He tears the tape from her mouth. He carries her upstairs, pressing her to his chest. She has been dead for hours. The cause of death will later be determined as asphyxia by strangulation. But the medical examiner also finds evidence of a severe blow to her skull, an 8.5-inch fracture, caused by blunt force trauma. The head injury, the examiner determines, occurred before the strangulation. There is also evidence, deeply disturbing and widely reported at the time, suggesting she was sexually assaulted. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey is 6 years old. She weighs 45 pounds. And when John Ramsey carries her body out of that basement and lays her on the floor of the living room, surrounded by the last of the Christmas decorations, the crime scene, already compromised, becomes something the prosecution will later describe as a nightmare. Because in that moment, with the father cradling his child and friends crowding the room and officers standing uncertain in doorways, the most important hours for evidence collection are slipping away. Something deeply wrong has happened inside this house. The question that will consume the next 3 decades is, what, exactly, and who is responsible? The Boulder Police Department is not equipped for this. That is not an accusation. It is a fact, later acknowledged by almost everyone involved. Boulder, Colorado, with its low crime rate and its reputation for civility, simply has not seen many homicides, let alone one of this complexity. The department's homicide investigators are competent professionals, but they are working with limited resources, limited experience in cases of this magnitude, and a crime scene that has already been compromised before they fully understand what they're dealing with. In the days following December 26th, the investigation faces a series of problems that compound on each other like falling dominoes. The most significant, the Ramseys lawyer up almost immediately. This is their legal right. Their attorneys advise them not to submit to police interviews for weeks. The first formal police interview with John and Patsy Ramsey doesn't take place until April 1997, more than 3 months after their daughter's death. By the time detectives finally sit across from the parents, the trail has gone cold in ways that are very difficult to recover. The ransom note becomes the centerpiece of early analysis. Handwriting experts are brought in. Patsy Ramsey gives a sample. The analysis is inconclusive. Experts cannot definitively say she wrote it, and cannot definitively say she didn't. But they can say this: whoever wrote the note almost certainly spent significant time inside the house to write it. The note is written on a pad of paper found in the house, using a pen found in the house. This means the killer, or killers, sat down inside the Ramsey home, before or after the murder, and composed a 2.5-page letter. That detail alone is extraordinary. It suggests calculation, planning, a familiarity with the space. The physical evidence from the crime scene is, in some ways, even more troubling. In the wine cellar where JonBenét is found, investigators discover a high-tech boot print, a brand not owned by any Ramsey family member, and not matching any of the officers who responded that day. They find a small suitcase positioned beneath a broken basement window, as though someone had used it as a step to climb in or out. The window latch is broken. A scuff mark on the wall below the window is consistent with someone climbing through. But here is the open loop that haunts this investigation for years. Remember it, because it matters. The basement window and the suitcase position were noted on December 26th. But investigators initially focused so heavily on the family that the exterior entry point doesn't receive the forensic attention it deserves until much later. By then, it is almost too late. The Boulder Police Department makes a decision that will define this case for a generation. Quietly, almost from the beginning, they focus their suspicion on Jon and Patsy Ramsey. There are reasons, from their perspective, that have some forensic logic. Statistically, when a child is killed inside a locked home with no signs of forced entry, at least, no signs that are immediately visible, the perpetrator is most often someone who lives there. The ransom note, rather than being seen as evidence of an intruder, is viewed by some detectives as a staged prop designed to misdirect them. The specific dollar amount matching Jon's bonus seems like the kind of inside knowledge that only a family member would possess. But the Ramseys have their own investigators, their own handwriting analysts, their own lawyers, and the parallel investigation that their legal team conducts starts to build a different picture. One of an intruder who may have had access to the house for months. One of a community that the Ramseys had opened their home to repeatedly. Parties, contractors, housekeepers, service workers. For months, the investigation becomes a war between two competing narratives. The Boulder police on one side, pointing inward at the family. A growing number of outside voices on the other, including some of the nation's most respected forensic experts, pointing toward an unidentified intruder. And then, in 1997, the case moves into territory no one expected. District Attorney Alex Hunter announces something almost unprecedented. Rather than proceeding toward a grand jury or a direct indictment, he begins working alongside the Ramsey legal team and Boulder police in what is described as a collaborative investigation, a move that infuriates investigators who feel the DA's office is too close to the family's legal representation. The friction between the Boulder Police Department and the DA's office becomes public knowledge. Lead detectives Steve Thomas and later Lou Smith, a renowned Colorado investigator brought in specifically to consult on the case, reached diametrically opposite conclusions. Thomas believes a family member is responsible. Lou Smith believes an intruder committed the crime. Smith's credentials are beyond question. He has solved over 200 murders in his career, and after spending months buried in the physical evidence, he walks into the DA's office and resigns because he believes the investigation is going in the wrong direction. The case that was supposed to be solved in weeks is becoming something else entirely, a wound that refuses to close. And there is a piece of evidence waiting in the wings, one that the world doesn't know about yet, that is going to change everything. The year is 1997, and America has already made up its mind. Not through evidence, not through a trial, but through tabloids, through television, through the relentless machinery of public opinion that descends on Boulder, Colorado, with an appetite for a villain and a willingness to appoint one before the facts are in. The Ramseys are tried in the court of public opinion with a ferocity that is, by any measure, remarkable. Patsy Ramsey's pageant photographs of JonBenét, taken for entirely ordinary competition purposes, are reprinted in newspapers and magazines in ways that recast them as sinister. Every detail of the family's life is examined through a lens of suspicion. Their friends are interviewed. Their finances are scrutinized. Their behavior after the murder, flying to Atlanta for the funeral, grieving in the company of family, is criticized as suspicious. In 1997, Jon and Patsy Ramsey write and publish a book, The Death of Innocence, telling their story and defending themselves publicly. The response is predictably divided. To their supporters, it is the act of grieving parents who have been railroaded by an incompetent police department and a bloodthirsty press. To their critics, it is a calculated public relations maneuver. Meanwhile, the physical investigation continues in ways the public largely doesn't see. Forensic scientists are working on something quietly, methodically, in the background. DNA analysis of samples collected from JonBenét's body and clothing. In 1997, DNA technology is advancing rapidly, but it is not yet what it will become in a decade. Some of the samples are small, degraded, difficult to process. The work is painstaking. What they find is this. Under JonBenét's fingernails and in the waistband of her underpants, investigators find DNA, biological material that belongs to an unknown male. Not John Ramsey, not Burke Ramsey, not any of the officers or investigators who processed the scene. An unknown male whose DNA has no match in any law enforcement database. This finding is significant. It is not definitive. Defense experts will later argue that touch DNA can be transferred innocently, that the DNA could belong to a clothing manufacturer, that contamination is possible. But for Lou Smith and the investigators who believe in the intruder theory, it is the most important piece of physical evidence in the case. It is a stranger's biology on a dead child's body from the night she was murdered. For years, this DNA sits in a database. Investigators run it against known sex offenders, against people who attend the same events as the Ramseys, against contractors and service workers who had access to the house, against neighbors, against anyone who surfaces as a credible lead. No match. In 1999, a grand jury is convened to examine the case. 23 Boulder County citizens sit for 13 months, reviewing hundreds of thousands of pages of evidence. In October 1999, they vote to indict, but not on murder charges. The grand jury recommends indicting John and Patsy Ramsey for child abuse resulting in death and being accessories after the fact. District Attorney Alex Hunter reviews their decision and refuses to sign the indictment. He announces publicly that there is insufficient evidence to prosecute. The grand jury's recommendation remains sealed, unknown to the public. It will not become public knowledge for another 15 years. Then, in 2006, there is an arrest. His name is John Mark Carr. He is a 41-year-old American man living in Thailand, a former elementary school teacher with a documented obsession with the JonBenét Ramsey case. He contacts a University of Colorado journalism professor by email and eventually confesses to the killing. He claims to have been with JonBenét on Christmas night. He claims her death was accidental. The world watches as Carr is extradited from Thailand, escorted onto a plane by American law enforcement, fed shrimp and champagne on the flight home, an image that generates almost universal disgust given the circumstances. Boulder authorities are cautiously optimistic. The DA's office convenes press conferences, and then the DNA comes back. John Mark Carr's DNA does not match the unknown male DNA found on JonBenét's body. Not even close. Investigators can also find no credible evidence that Carr was even in Boulder, Colorado, on December 25, 1996. His ex-wife later states that he spent that Christmas with her and their children in Alabama. All charges against John Mark Carr are dropped. It is one of the most embarrassing prosecutorial misfires in recent American history. And the unknown male DNA, the shadow that has haunted this investigation since 1997, remains unmatched. But something is coming that none of them could have predicted. Before we talk about what happens next in this investigation, we need to pause. Because the years between 2006 and 2008 bring something that has nothing to do with DNA databases or grand juries. Something that reframes the entire emotional landscape of this case. Patsy Ramsey is diagnosed with a recurrence of ovarian cancer in 2002. The cancer that she had beaten back in the early 1990s has returned, and this time it is relentless. She fights it for 4 years. She undergoes treatment. She continues to speak publicly about her daughter's case, about her belief in their innocence, about her faith that the real killer will one day be found. On June 24, 2006, just 2 months before John Mark Carr's arrest and false confession make global headlines, Patsy Ramsey dies at her parents' home in Roswell, Georgia. She is 49 years old. She never sees her daughter's killer identified. She never gets to hear a jury say what happened in that house. John Ramsey, who has quietly rebuilt his life in Michigan, attends the Carr arrest press conferences in 2006 with a kind of exhausted, cautious hope, and then watches it collapse when the DNA results come in. Burke Ramsey grows up largely out of the public eye, which is a near-miraculous achievement given the scrutiny placed on his family since he was 9 years old. In 2016, a CBS documentary special titled The Case of JonBenét Ramsey suggests through the analysis of a forensic expert that Burke Ramsey may have been responsible for his sister's death. Burke sues CBS for defamation. In 2019, CBS settles the lawsuit for an undisclosed amount. Meanwhile, the technology that investigators always hoped would one day crack this case is evolving at a pace no one in 1996 could have imagined. In 2008, the Boulder District Attorney's Office takes a new look at the DNA evidence using advanced testing methods, specifically a technique called touch DNA analysis, which can extract a genetic profile from skin cells left behind by touch rather than traditional biological fluids. The testing is conducted by Bode Technology in Virginia. The results produce a more complete profile of the unknown male DNA than had previously been possible. DA Mary Lacey makes a decision. On July 9, 2008, she sends a letter to John Ramsey. In it, she writes that the DNA results eliminate John and Patricia Ramsey and therefore clears them as suspects in the murder of their daughter. The letter formally exonerates John and Patsy Ramsey from suspicion. For John Ramsey, who has spent 12 years under the shadow of public suspicion, the letter is both a relief and a wound. His daughter is still dead. His wife died not knowing if the public would ever believe them. And the person whose DNA is on his daughter's body, a stranger, an unknown male, is still free. The case transfers in 2009 from the Boulder Police Department to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. A dedicated task force is eventually assembled. New forensic techniques are applied to old evidence. The DNA profile, expanded by the 2008 testing, is run against an ever-growing national database. And then comes what may be the most significant development in this case since JonBenét's body was found. In 2023, the Boulder District Attorney's Office announces that investigators are using genetic genealogy, the same revolutionary technique used to identify the Golden State Killer in 2018, to pursue the unknown male DNA found in this case. Genetic genealogy works by uploading a DNA profile to genealogy databases and tracing family trees to identify potential relatives of an unknown suspect. It has already solved dozens of cold cases across the country. Investigators are now, as of the most recent reporting, actively working through familial matches, building family trees, narrowing a pool of potential suspects. The technology is precise. It is patient. And it has, in other cases, led investigators directly to perpetrators who believe they had outrun justice for decades. The case of JonBenét Ramsey is not closed. It is, according to law enforcement, actively being investigated. But what does the totality of the evidence, assembled over 27 years, actually tell us? Let's hold all of it at once for a moment. The ransom note, written with materials found inside the home. The basement window with the broken latch and the suitcase positioned beneath it. The high-tech boot print that matches no family member. The DNA of an unknown male found on JonBenét's body that no one has been able to identify in 27 years. The grand jury recommendation that was suppressed for 15 years. The wrongful arrest of John Mark Carr. The formal exoneration of the Ramseys. The death of Patsy Ramsey before any of it was resolved. And at the center of all of it, a 6-year-old girl in a white turtleneck and black velvet pants, carried to bed by her father on Christmas night, who never wakes up. The JonBenét Ramsey case is, in many ways, a mirror held up to the systems we trust to deliver justice. And the reflection is not always comfortable to look at. The Boulder Police Department, operating under immense public pressure, focused their investigation on the family in a way that, by the assessment of multiple outside experts, caused them to under-investigate the intruder theory during the critical early weeks of the case. The contamination of the crime scene on December 26th, the multiple people moving through the house, the father carrying the body, may have destroyed evidence that could have solved this case within months. The media, which in 1996 and 1997 operated with a speed and a reach that outpaced the facts available to it, tried the Ramseys publicly and found them guilty before any jury was ever impaneled. Patsy Ramsey, in particular, was subjected to a level of public scrutiny and condemnation that, given what we now know about the DNA evidence, amounted to a years-long public injustice visited upon a mother who was simultaneously grieving an unimaginable loss. There is a cruelty specific to that particular kind of injustice, not the legal kind, not the kind with courts and sentences, but the informal kind, the court of public opinion that convicts without procedure, punishes without appeal, and never issues a retraction. John Ramsey is 79 years old as of 2024. He ran unsuccessfully for Michigan State Legislature in 2004. He has remarried. He lives a quiet life. He has spent nearly 3 decades watching the investigation into his daughter's murder proceed in fits and starts, watching technology evolve, watching the world move on and return and move on again. He has spoken publicly about his belief that genetic genealogy will eventually identify the killer. Burke Ramsey, now in his mid-30s, lives privately. The settlement from his CBS lawsuit resolved without a public admission of wrongdoing. The unknown male, whoever he is, wherever he is, has carried the secret of what happened in that basement for nearly 30 years. If he is still alive, he is aging. If genetic genealogy does what it has done in other cases, there may come a day when investigators knock on a door somewhere in America and the secret finally breaks open. There is something that this case reveals about the way we process grief as a culture, the way we need a villain, the way uncertainty is almost intolerable to us, the way we reach for a story that makes sense even when the facts don't yet support one. We decided the Ramseys were guilty before the investigation was complete. We broadcasted that verdict through every available channel. And we were wrong. The lessons of the JonBenét Ramsey case are not comfortable ones. They ask us to sit with uncertainty, to resist the seductive simplicity of a clean narrative, to remember that the parents of a murdered child are, first and foremost, the parents of a murdered child. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey loved horses. She loved her dog. She loved Christmas. She was learning to read. She had a laugh that lit up rooms. She deserves an answer. Her father deserves an answer. The city of Boulder, which has carried this wound for nearly 30 years, deserves an answer. The DNA is out there. The genealogy databases are growing. The technology that cracked the Golden State Killer, a case that went unsolved for decades, is now pointed at this one. Somewhere in America, in a house with an ordinary address and an ordinary mailbox, there may be a person who knows what the rest of us have spent 27 years trying to find out. And in the fullness of time, justice, the real kind, the kind with evidence and due process and truth, may finally find its way back to a little girl who deserved so much better than the story she got. JonBenét Ramsey was 6 years old. She loved horses and Christmas and her dog. She had a laugh that filled rooms. Somewhere tonight, the person who killed her is either dead or they are living an ordinary life in an ordinary house with an ordinary mailbox. And they have been doing that for 27 years.